Namaskar, this is Akhilesh Bhargava. Welcome to Tit-Bits on Business and Finance with me. Amidst the continued corona pandemic, the continued lockdown and close down of the Indian economy, and the unresolved NPA crisis that we witness, banks have been reluctant to lend, and that reflects in the weak credit growth in the economy. Despite all the government's efforts to push up the credit growth, it has not gone up. And compared to last year, when credit growth was at the rate of 13.5%, at this time it is just about 5%. And we said the government has been trying its best to push up the credit growth. Since bankers have not been willing to lend, they have been depositing huge amounts of money in the safe custody of the Reserve Bank of India by way of deposits with the RBI. And those deposits of banks with the RBI at the moment are reported to be over 8.5 lakh crores. The irony of the matter is that while bankers are not willing to lend and they have been copiously depositing their funds with the Reserve Bank of India instead of giving it to needy borrowers, the irony is that despite this, banks and financial institutions have been extremely eager to raise additional funds. When they are not using the present funds for their existing business of lending and are merely depositing it with the RBI, then where is the need to raise additional money? If you look at the list of potential borrowers at the moment, it's a long list. Every bank, every financial institution which is eligible and capable of borrowing money is trying to access the capital markets and trying to raise giant amounts of money, whether by way of equity or debt. And what is this list at the moment? HDFC Bank wants to raise 50,000 crores from the markets in this financial year. HDFC proposes to raise 45,000 crores from the markets. PNB Housing Finance has come up with a plan to raise 45,000 crores from markets this year. Yes Bank has already opened its FPO for raising 15,000 crores. Axis Bank proposes to raise 15,000 crores again. State Bank of India has a borrowing plan of $1.5 billion, which is about 11,000 crores from the capital markets this year. And even a small private bank like the City Union Bank proposes to raise 1,100 crores. All these plans are expected to fructify in this financial year. According to Credit Suisse, the estimated amount of money that banks and financial institutions are going to raise from capital markets in India this year is about $20 billion, which is upwards of 1.5 lakh crores. That's the massive fundraising that banks are indulging in, as we said, by way of debt or equity. All these additional funds are being raised, of course, to bolster, strengthen and fortify the balance sheets of banks, which certainly also face dangers as every entity faces today because of the lockdown of the economy. The question that comes is, when bankers are not lending, when they are reluctant lenders, then why are they so eager borrowers? Why are they raising such kind of huge funds? The reasons are very evident. The moratorium continues at the moment, so we really do not know what are the kind of defaults that are going to take place in the system. The moratorium continues, the lockdown continues, and during the continuation of the lockdown and the moratorium, there has been no improvement in the income or cash flows of the borrowers. They continue to be in an extremely weak position and their position continues to weaken. It is because of this absence of cash flows that many borrowers have opted for the moratorium which has been offered. Rough estimates say that 45 to 50% of borrowers have opted for the moratorium in public sector banks as well as in private sector banks. 20 to 30 large borrowers have opted again for the moratorium, and which is disturbing. That indicates that they are conserving cash or they are facing dangers in their operating cash flows. And 50 to 70% borrowers in the case of NBFCs have opted for the moratorium. The moratorium has only given temporary relief to borrowers. It's not a permanent solution. After it ends, the recovery is bound to be due. At that time, we are going to witness a flood of new defaults. After the moratorium ends and bankers realize that more and more borrowers are unable to pay, banks are going to face shortages in their operating cash flows. They are going to face cash flow mismatches because if borrowers don't repay, how do the banks get their funds to do their own business? Banks are going to witness defaults, they are going to witness losses, they are going to witness rising NPAs, and their capital is going to be eroded. And therefore, at this point of time, they have already seen the need for funds and they have got into the capital markets. That's the primary and first reason that we see. And the very size of the funds being raised by the banks, over 1.5 lakh crores, is not a small amount, clearly predicts the kind of giant default waves that banks are expecting once the pandemic is over and the lockdown is lifted. That explains the reason why these kind of amounts are being raised. Further, the pandemic continues, the lockdown continues, and if the pandemic is proving fatal to human lives, it is also proving fatal to businesses. The longer the pandemic continues, the more will be their business closures and business failures. And the larger the number of business failures, the more will be their defaults and repayment of bank loans. Bankers are certainly aware of this reality and are perhaps trying to preempt their situation, and thus this kind of fundraising is taking place. Additional funds being raised by banks will help them to stabilize their operations and stabilize their state of affairs. Banks also need money at this stage, knowing the fact that when the pandemic is lifted, when the economy starts resuming some kind of normalcy and growth, there will be a genuine demand for funds, and they are getting prepared for that now. Another issue which gets omitted at times is the fact is that households and entities at the moment are surviving on their savings. They are having little income during this period, and expenses continues, EMIs continue. They are living on their savings, they are withdrawing bank balances by spending them. This means that the size of funds available with banks is going down, and banks need to replenish it, which also explains the present round of funding they are doing. By raising money to this extent, bankers are going to be able to maintain their capital adequacy ratios, and they will also be able to maintain the size of their balance sheets and the size of business that they continue. To us, these are the reasons why bankers are indulging in this kind of fundraising. What are the larger issues that emerge from this giant fundraising proposed to be done by banks and financial institutions in India? The first one, this kind of fundraising will certainly strengthen the balance sheets of banks and financial institutions. They will be prepared to face a tough time, which is very evident. But if it is going to bolster their balance sheets, it does not necessarily mean that it is going to bolster their profitability also. Banks in India of late have had a very poor track record of return on assets and their profitability. And that's because they have not been doing their business of lending, or they have done it poorly. Unless these additional funds which are being raised by banks are not used prudently for their business of lending, you will not see an improvement in their profitability, and that is one issue that emerges. The second is, banks have been coming to the markets today and virtually they are going to monopolize it. They are going to mop away all the savings from the market, leaving little for others who are also needy and eligible to raise funds from the market. This taking away of money by the banks largely is going to affect other borrowers, and that's a matter of concern. The other issue that comes is, what if bankers raise this kind of funds and they do not lend? They continue to be reluctant lenders and go and deposit the funds with the Reserve Bank. That is not going to be good for the economy, and we need to be concerned about that. And investors need to be clear that giving monies to banks may certainly give safety to their funds, but it does not necessarily mean that they are going to get a handsome return on investment. The finance sector has been struggling and continues to struggle. A key point of concern according to us is that if the regulators, which is RBI and SEBI, are blindly permitting banks and financial institutions to come to the markets and raise such mammoth amounts of money from public financial institutions and institutional investors, then we need to remind the regulators that banks and financial institutions have actually destroyed wealth and value in India of late. That is very evident from the giant NPAs in the country which remain unresolved, and more are in the pipeline. And before the regulators give approvals for raising such funds, they must look into this matter. The second point that they need to also understand is that banks have not been very good intermediaries of late. They are in the business of intermediation. They borrow and they lend. and they have not been good at lending, and that explains why they have gone and deposited huge amounts of money with the Reserve Bank of India. The regulators must look into this and be very clear that if additional money being raised is not going to be used for the purpose of lending or for the core business of intermediation as we call it, then such kind of approvals for fundraising should certainly be denied. We really hope that these amount of huge funds being raised from the public and financial institutions by bank this time do not go waste, and they are used to build further wealth for the nation, for the investors and for the shareholders. This is Akhilesh Bhargava signing off till we meet again. Namaskar.
हमारे घरों में भी बच्चे होते हैं जो हमसे प्यार दुलार की आस करते हैं।
हमारा भी जीवन साथी है जिसको हमारे ड्यूटी से घर आने का इंतजार होता है।
हमारे घर में भी एक बूढ़ी माँ है जिनके लिए आज भी हम ही आंखों के तारे हैं।
लेकिन हम हमारे घरों में नहीं है। आपकी सुरक्षा में कोई कसर न रहे, इसलिए हम अपने प्रियजनों से दूर है।
हम में से ही कुछ तो अब इतने दूर जा चुके हैं कि वो वापस अपने घरों को लौट भी नहीं पाएंगे।
हमें गर्व है कि हमारे कंधों पे मुंबई शहर के नागरिकों की सुरक्षा की जिम्मेदारी है। हमारे जज्बे और बलिदान को व्यर्थ न जाने दे। इस संकट के समय में आप घर पे रहे, सुरक्षित रहे।
Now be the first to know about the latest updates on our new news app. Go on your Android or iOS, search for HW News Network. Download our app, choose the language you prefer to get updates in, and be up to date with the latest news.
If you like this video, please share it, and we would love to hear your comments in the comments section down here. Also, please do like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter to get minute-to-minute news updates. For more such shows and videos, well, subscribe to our YouTube channel.